During Fallout 3's main quest, the player travels across the post-apocalyptic ruins of DC in search of their father, but soon finds themselves mixed up in a pivotal conflict that leads to either the destruction or salvation of the capital wasteland. However, many elements of the main story went through significant revisions during the game's 4-year development, and Bethesda's intentions were originally much grander. This is Fallout 3's main quest cut content.
It's a boy. A boy. We've got a son, Catherine. A beautiful, healthy baby boy.
The beginning of the game appears to have played out essentially the same, with the player being born, customizing their appearance, and choosing their special stats, but we see our first divergence during their 10th birthday party. There are 3 cut NPCs who were meant to appear at the player's party: Christine Kendall, Stevie Mac, and his sister Susie Mac. Like the other birthday participants, they would have worn vault suits, Pip-Boys, and party hats. In the final game, Christine and Susie can only be encountered later on during the quest Future Imperfect, while Stevie can only be found during the escape quest. Despite being cut, Christine is still mentioned in dialogue during this scene, even though she doesn't appear until later on. On one hand, additional characters and dialogue wouldn't have hurt, but I doubt they would have added all that much in the end, and I can definitely see why they were eventually cut out. Todd Howard amusingly recorded a few placeholder lines for testing the birthday sequence that still remain in Dad's dialogue files.
Happy birthday! Yep. Surprise.
Later, the player takes the GOAT test, and there are several cut terminal messages that likely would have appeared during this section. These regarded various classroom lessons, 2 for homework, and 1 for math, science, home economics, and health. Each message is exactly the same, blah-dee blah blah. There's also a cut note called Lesson Review History, which reads blah 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 blah. I suspect all of these would have appeared on Edwin Broch's computer. It's possible they were cut because they're not very interesting, though they might just be placeholder messages that were never finished. During the quest Escape, the player is awoken and told not only that their father has mysteriously disappeared, but that the Vault security forces are out to kill them. You then make your way through the installation, fighting past rad roaches and security guards before finally escaping from Vault 101. However, it seems this sequence played out much differently earlier in development, as an early preview states, "Your 19th birthday is the one that sets the main quest off. You simply wake up and notice that your father is gone. No explanation, no nothing. Just up and disappeared." The Vault Overseer sure seems cheesed off about your father leaving, and forbids you to go after him. A reoccurring theme comes up during the Vault portion, when the Overseer comments that you were born in the Vault, you will die in the Vault. So naturally the main quest objective of your 19th birthday is to leave the Vault. How you do so is up to you. While Paul Arulo simply had a keycard that opened the vault, Howard commented that you could hack the door open, or pilfer the keycard, like Paul Arulo did, or even find a different way to get out. This article seems to imply that the radroach infestation and immediately hostile security guards weren't a part of this quest at this point in development. It suggests a more open-ended escape sequence, where the player had multiple options to escape, potentially having the opportunity to avoid combat altogether. Notably, the reasons for the Overseer wanting to kill you and the radroach infestation are both poorly explained. This might just be a coincidence, but perhaps these elements were only added in much later, resulting in them not feeling fully fleshed out. It's unclear why this was altered, but maybe the chaotic aspects of the quest were added in later to give the player a stronger motive to actually leave the vault. If so, this was likely a positive change that improved the tutorial's pacing, even if it made the player's escape options much more linear. The escape quest also has a final cut quest stage, where the player needed to restart the reactor before the vault exit would open. The unused, unfinished reactor cell is still in the game files, and it gives us an interesting look at how the stage would have played out. It has 13 rad roaches who would have been the primary enemies here. Notably, 4 of them are named after Stanley, and an unused faction makes them hostile to Stanley, suggesting he was going to be under attack when first encountered. After killing the rad roaches and rescuing Stanley, the player could ask him several questions. He has 4 deleted dialogue topics, 2 of which are completely missing. In the other 2 you could ask him, why is the power out, and what are you doing down here? Unfortunately, the response dialogue for all of these was either deleted or never recorded. One line does remain where the player could ask him, I need to turn the power back on, where are the reactor controls? At which point he'd reply,
Oh, well, right over there through that door. You'll have to turn on all 3 generators, none of them will take the load by themselves anymore. Well, I'd do it myself, but I'm under orders from the Overseer not to turn them back on without his say-so. But I don't suppose I know anything about what you might get up to.
In the final game, Stanley can be found during the escape quest, but you can't speak to him unfortunately. The cut quest stages reveal the player needed to enter the reactor room, then turn the power back on by flipping 3 control panels. One room in the cut cell contains these reactors, and there's some nearby lights linked to them that would have turned on once the reactors were activated. Unused code reveals that after the player flipped the first reactor switch, the Overseer would call for help, suggesting he was present in the cell and perhaps appeared right after the player interacted with the control panels. After flipping all 3 switches, Security Chief Hannon spawns right in front of you, then yells one of 2 lines depending on the player's gender before attacking.
He's turning the power back on. To the control room. She's turning the power back on. To the control room.
This part of the scene still works, though it's obviously far from completion and would have played out much differently if it had been completed. A note in the results script box mentions that multiple other guards would react as well, spawning in at the entrance and running in to see what's going on. There's a shout marker, AI packages, and X markers for a patrol route that would have brought the guards to the generators. A nearby room contains a smaller generator, and a marker linked to it is named Backup Generator. It's unknown if it would have been used to restore the main generators or if it had a different purpose. Afterwards, the player could open the vault and finally escape. This was most likely cut to streamline the end of the intro sequence, though it might be a remnant of the early open-ended iteration of the quest. While the vast majority of rooms in this cut area have no clutter, there are a few notable points of interest. One room contains rusted bed frames, while one of the hallways has an incomplete door and some knocked over lockers. One of the doors intriguingly has a trigger placed right outside of it, but its purpose is unknown. Another room has some holding tanks and lab machines. A marker linked to the lights in this room reveals that it was the hydroponics room. There's a nearby terminal named MS-16, revealing it was once linked to Trouble on the Home Front, the quest where the player returns and potentially destroys the vault's water chip. This implies that that section of the quest originally took place in this cut cell, rather than the much smaller sub-basement area where it appears in the final game. There are 5 unused Overseer messages that would have been found on terminals throughout the vault. The first 3 would have been found in different sections of the intro sequence and read, "Every day in the vault is a day of freedom and safety from the horrors outside. Celebrate each new day and be thankful for your home. Accept who you are and embrace your role in the vault. There are no worthless jobs and no worthless people, except those without jobs. Loyalty keeps us strong, caution keeps us secure, the vault keeps us alive." The next note would have been found when returning to Vault 101 during Trouble on the Home Front. "The vault is our world and our succor. There is nothing outside the vault except death." Finally, this last message would have been discovered after completing Trouble on the Home Front. For generations, the vault has been our home. Now, we can get to know the neighborhood. Finally, there's an unused cell called Vault 101 Demo, a mostly empty copy of the vault's main level that was used for testing. A few of the rooms do have clutter, and these were likely used to make pre-release screenshots. One room contains a much smaller version of the classroom that was likely used to test the slideshow sequence. The only NPC in this cell is a very glitchy Mr. Handy, floating around in obscurity for eternity. There's also an area that was apparently used to test the main menu screen. Intriguingly, this cell had some unintended consequences on the final game, as there's a copy of the Tales of a Junktown Jerky Vendor skill book found here. There are 25 attainable versions of each skill book, except for the barter skill, which is missing one. It seems that whoever placed the skill books throughout the world mistakenly counted this one even though it's inaccessible, meaning the player can only find 24 of them during normal play. The player then escapes Vault 101 and travels into the capital wasteland for the first time. Their search for their father eventually leads to the quest Scientific Pursuits and the settlement of Rivet City. Rivet City is one of the game's most impressive locations, and considering that, it makes sense that the area went through multiple iterations. In the final game, the settlement is made up from several large meshes that are pieced together, but there's a very interesting unused NIF file called Rivet City that's a single mesh. Perhaps Rivet City was the early name for Rivet City, but if I had to bet, I'd say this was a designer making a joke. This asset isn't in the GEC, only in the BSA files, but by deleting the original city and adding it back, we can see how this early blockout once appeared. This early variation is intact and visually much different than what appears in-game, similar to some of the area's concept art. The asset has an interesting large indentation that likely represented the main entrance. I absolutely love getting to see forgotten artifacts of development like this, and it's fascinating to imagine how much different this variation would have looked. There they speak to a scientist named Dr. Madison Lee, and she has a unique cut set of glasses in the game files. In Adam Adawick's concept art, she's interestingly also depicted wearing glasses. These make her appearance a bit different, and it's unknown if these were cut as a design decision or due to an oversight. Dr. Lee tells the player their dad returned to Project Purity, a large-scale water purifier capable of filtering out radiation from all of the water in the capital wasteland. You now make your way to the Jefferson Memorial, and inside you discover several holotapes recorded by your father. These holotapes are numbered 1 through 10, but strangely there are only 8 of them in the final game. Further, the dialogue for these holotapes is numbered 1 through 21, and many of the entries are missing. There's also an interesting unused entry in the GEC called Project Purity Holotape 1, and a note confirms it was intended to be a part of this quest. Strangely, it uses one of Dad's lines from a later quest as a placeholder though. Perhaps the developers once intended to include the 2 missing holotapes, but ended up scrapping them for one reason or another.
Welcome to Vault 112, resident. According to sensors, you have arrived 202.3 years behind schedule.
One of these holotapes leads the player to Vault 112, which contains a virtual reality simulation made by the villainous Dr. Stanislas Braun. Entering one of these pods transports the player into the simulation and begins the 7th main quest, Tranquility Lane. Here your father has been transformed into a dog named Doc. Doc has an unused texture that was likely cut because the entire quest plays out in black and white. It's surprising this wasn't recycled for another unique dog or enemy variant though, as the texture looks great and could have given dogs a bit more visual variety.
Run. Run!
The player now frees themselves from the simulation, reunites with their dad, and travels back to Rivet City, beginning the quest The Waters of Life. Then Dad, Dr. Lee, and some of the citizens of Rivet City travel to Project Purity. During the process of repairing the water purifier, the Enclave attacks suddenly and Dad sabotages the reactor, sacrificing himself to protect the player and the wasteland. This is one of the most memorable sequences in Fallout 3, but originally it played out differently. Unused dialogue suggests that Project Purity's rotunda chamber wasn't sealed when the player first entered. Dr. Lee was apparently also inside the chamber, and Dad would desperately urge her to leave the room. Dr. Lee's first cut line has a note for the voice actor that reads, "Losing her cool."
James, this is wrong. You can't do this.
Dad's reply has a note that says, calm, reassuring, speaking to someone who's bordering on hysterical.
Madison, please. Now's not the time. I'll get the information the Colonel needs, but I need you to...
Madison's next line notes, stressed out, confused.
I won't help you do this, James, not after everything it took to get here.
Dad's following line mentions, trying to get his point across to someone who's not listening.
Madison, please. It's very important that you do this right now. Just step over to the panel while I access the computer in the control booth.
Madison's last bit of dialogue says, confused but starting to understand.
What? What are you talking about? That doesn't even make sense. James,
Dad's final line mentions, basically saying goodbye to someone he cares about.
Please, just monitor the pumps.
At this point, Dr. Lee would exit the chamber and the rest of the scene would play out as it does in the retail version. This dialogue is genuinely touching and I'm not sure why it was cut. The Enclave appears suddenly during this quest, and they know not only the location of Project Purity, but also its purpose. This is never explained, but there's some fascinating evidence that would have clarified the Enclave's interest and knowledge of the project. The following dialogue were some of the very first lines added into the game, and it's unknown who the player was speaking to, but I suspect the first two lines were directed at the player's dad. Okay, so you were talking to the Enclave. What did they want? You were talking to the Enclave? About what? The next lines appear to be a conversation with a different character, seemingly Colonel Autumn, and I suspect they regard the player's dad as well. Liar! He would never betray me like that. What? No, that's impossible. He would never, would he? Finally, the player could interrupt whoever they were talking to multiple times, but the actual lines are sadly missing. All of this seems to imply the player's dad once worked alongside the Enclave in some capacity, and maybe he originally needed their help to repair or complete Project Purity. This is all speculation given how little information we have, but the Enclave appearing out of nowhere always felt like a bit of a plot hole, and this would have helped their debut in the main quest feel less jarring. There's also a cut terminal entry regarding one of the turrets that would have been found during some point of the quest. It's not particularly interesting though, and it was a good decision to cut it. Turret log Project Purity. Robco OS version 8.5, 2076 Robco. User log, Administrator Robco ID 2398H. New admin, Lee Madison. Welcome new user, Lee Madison. New targeting parameter, Purity Researchers User Group.
James. He's gone. We have to get out of here. They'll be coming for us next. We've got to evacuate now.
Now the player fights their way through waves of Enclave soldiers, escorting Dr. Lee and the other scientist into the Taft tunnels before eventually reaching the Citadel. However, this quest was reworked from a much grander idea. During an interview, lead designer and writer Emil Polarulo revealed, Howard also vetoed a Fallout 3 level that would have been among the most ambitious in the game. It would have seen Enclave forces launch an all-out assault on Rivet City, the settlement inside a rustling aircraft carrier anchored in the Potomac. Players would have been tasked with escorting its inhabitants to the Citadel, the nearby Brotherhood of Steel stronghold in what used to be the Pentagon. Polarulo was eager to include the combat-intensive level, but Howard said that the mission was just too big. Now, the designer retroactively agreed with his boss, saying in the end he was right, we couldn't do it. There are no remaining traces of this quest, but a remnant of it can still be seen in this early map shown at GDC 2012. The tunnel that runs beneath the Potomac River clearly connects the Citadel to Rivet City, not the Jefferson Memorial as it does in the retail release. Strangely, we can also see an arrow that suggests the player first traveled from the Citadel to Rivet City, but that's more difficult to speculate on. Finally, Rivet City is shown to be in a different position than its placement in the final game. Shades of this original idea can still be seen in the retail version, when the player escorts Dr. Lee and the other scientists from the Jefferson Memorial to the Citadel. Evacuating an entire city under an Enclave siege sounds like an amazing idea, but the sheer number of NPCs and effects required to make this convincing likely would have been impossible on consoles or even PCs from that time period. Further, it's easily one of the game's best settlements, so destroying it might have had an overall negative effect on the world. Regardless, it's a fascinating idea to consider, and it's easily some of the game's saddest cut content.
Lions! I know you're in there! I know you can hear me! You open this goddamn door right now!
During the 9th main quest, Picking Up the Trail, the player gains access to the Brotherhood-controlled ruins of the Pentagon, now known as the Citadel. Aspects of the Citadel's appearance went through multiple iterations, and this is best illustrated by the location's entrance. In the final game, the Citadel's interior is accessed via a makeshift gate in a destroyed wall. There's a gigantic, unused mesh called Citadel Stairs that was seemingly once considered for the Pentagon's front entrance. It's still in an early state with stretched textures and missing pieces. The stairs lead up to several Brotherhood symbols and a mishmash of railing that potentially led to the original entrance of the base. This is a really cool artifact of development that was likely made very early in production. Intriguingly, the Citadel is much larger in the Wasteland world space than the way it appears on the world map. It looks relatively small on the world map, but the exterior walls in the Wasteland run much further in all directions. The out-of-bounds area inside the walls is absolutely massive, and puts its scale into perspective. Notably, the Citadel isn't actually a pentagon in the Wasteland, as several of the walls are missing. Again, this is what it looks like on the world map, but in actuality the walls run across an immense portion of the world. The plexiglass map found at the Citadel is actually an early version of the world map, and in it the DC curtain wall seems to extend much further around the Citadel than it does in the final game. Comparing it to the final world map suggests the urban landscape around the Citadel was much different earlier in development, though it's difficult to speculate on how it looked originally. In the Wasteland world space, a crane is shown to be inside of the Citadel's Bailey. However, the crane is completely missing in the Bailey's interior cell, and this was likely cut to improve performance on consoles. There's no set pieces around the point where Liberty Prime emerges in the Citadel's Bailey, but that wasn't always the case. There's an unused mesh called Citadel Stand 01 that doesn't have a GEC entry, but it's still present in the BSA files. Strangely, this center stand has a roof, implying that Liberty Prime wasn't planned to emerge from the lower levels of the base when this asset was made. There's another cut mesh that was presumably made later in development called Citadel Stand 02, and this version is missing the roof. I'm guessing Liberty Prime clipped into this model during the scene, and that's why this version remains unused as well. The location also has several cut signs for the mess hall, library, and archives. Each of these locations appears inside the Citadel though, so it's unclear why these weren't used. After meeting Elder Lyons, the player accesses an old Vault-Tec computer to discover the location of the GEC. This terminal contains information on many of the game's vaults, and each has an entry named Project Goals. Selecting this option on any of the vaults results in a note that says access restricted, but originally it was going to have a note about Vault 101's true purpose. It reads, Vault 101 Goal Summary. Observe the effects of a contained environment through several generations. Observe the genetic impact of a small group of individuals breeding through several generations. This would have provided a bit more information on Vault-Tec's nefarious plans, and suggests they might have planned to reveal the project goals of the other vaults mentioned in the terminal too. I think this was a missed lore opportunity, and it's too bad it didn't make it in.
Hold it right there, mister! Don't take another step or we'll blow your fucking head off.
The entrance to Vault 87 is heavily irradiated, and the player is forced to travel through Little Lamplight, an underground settlement populated only by children. Notably, there are 3 unused cells here that share the same placeholder level. The first was a women's bathroom, suggesting there was once going to be 2 separate bathroom interiors in the caverns. The unisex bathroom that appears in the final game is actually named Men's Bathroom, implying it was repurposed once the other building was cut. The names of the other 2 cells are more intriguing: Spelunker's Restaurant and Little Lamplight Armory. Neither of these locations are present in the final game, suggesting that Little Lamplight was originally intended to have more interiors and potentially additional NPCs inside of them. Zip, one of the children found in the area, still has an AI package used by the Armory, but there's no other reference to either room. There's also an unused NPC who was meant to appear in Little Lamplight named Stacy. After speaking to the mayor and gaining access to the settlement, Stacy would have taken his place guarding the front gate. In the final game, there are strangely no guards at the front gate after speaking to the mayor. She still has an unused AI package that would have made her sleep at certain times, and a significant amount of dialogue regarding Little Lamplight. First, the player could tell her a friendly or rude line, both of which check for the Child at Heart perk. The friendly line reads, "Well, I'm glad there wasn't any blood over a misunderstanding."
New kids don't tend to walk up every day. We haven't had very good luck with visitors recently. Anyway, I'm Stacy, and I guard the front gate. If you need in or out, I can take care of that.
While the rude player line was, "I'm new in town and you're already threatening me," not a good start.
I don't threaten strangers, I shoot them. But since we're not strangers anymore, that's not a problem, right? I'm Stacy, and I take care of the front gate. If you're going in or out, I'll take care of it.
In another line, you could say, "Are you the only guard on the front gate?"
Now I am, yeah. But I'm a good guard, and no one's getting by me now.
Next, you could ask, "Why aren't there more guards here?"
We don't let many visitors in, and the scav teams usually use crawlspace exits to the surface, so they can't be followed. We usually use crawlspaces so mungos can't follow. This gate doesn't get used much, except letting in big cargo or mungos. Both are rare.
The player could now reply, "Sounds like a rough job."
You get used to it. Someone has to.
Then you could inquire, "What do you know about Vault 87?
Not much, really. Mayor has us steer clear of the door to Murder Pass, just in case. If you go near it, you can hear them howling. Can't hear much around the other door, though. I guess maybe there aren't as many back there. Doesn't matter much, though.
The next line has the same player dialogue as a previous line, but Stacy gives a different response. Presumably this would have been rewritten if she hadn't been cut.
We used to have 2 guards here, me and an older girl named Caps. But since the last time raiders attacked, it's just been me. I really miss Caps. Yeah, right now, we don't even have anyone to cover me when I'm asleep. Now leave me alone. I've got to be ready for duty soon.
Next, the player could say, "Caps, what do you mean?"
Caps used to take care of me. I would find hats for her collection. That's why she was called Caps, right? Before long, I was guarding the front gate with her. She liked the company. She liked the jokes I used to make. I think she liked me. When the raiders attacked last time, she didn't make it.
In another line, you could try an average difficulty speech check that reads, "You said you used to have another guard. What happened?"
There used to be another guard. She was named Caps. She used to take care of me. She liked my company guarding. She liked it when I used to tell jokes. Then some raiders attacked, and I was the only guard left.
The player could then choose between saying, "You can't blame yourself for her death," or "That's the way things go, you know?"
Except, I was supposed to be on guard when they attacked. I should have been here to help Caps. It really is my fault she died. Now I'm the only front gate guard, so it's my responsibility to make up for that. No, not anymore they don't. Now stop distracting me from my job.
If the speech check failed, she'd use the following line instead.
I don't want to talk about it with you.
Next, the player could choose between saying, "You're going to stand guard all alone from now on? Quite a sacrifice, Stacy."
Somebody needs to guard the front gate, and no one else is doing it, so I will. Even if it sucks for me, I don't mind. Some things just have to be done, and they just have to be done right. Because if they aren't, you can't ever get back what you lose. Besides, Caps would want it like that.
Or, "Sounds like it was your fault Caps died. Guards can't slack like that."
I know. And really, we're lucky we didn't lose more people in that attack. But we can't risk that a second time. I've got to stay extra vigilant on watch. Thanks for reminding me of that. Now leave me alone, no distractions.
Finally, you could ask, "Can you give me directions?"
Okay, where are you going?
It's unknown why Stacy was cut, considering the amount of work that went into her dialogue. Having an actual guard for the front gate would have helped Little Lamplight feel more plausible as a settlement, and it's a shame she got axed.
Forgive me. I'm not used to pleasantries. I'm more used to grunts and being struck about by the others.
During the 8th main quest, Finding the Garden of Eden, the player travels into the depths of Vault 87, the origin of super mutants in the region. The companion Fox plays a major role in this quest, and originally the player was going to find additional information about him throughout the vault. There are 5 unused holotapes that use the prefix MQ08 Shelton tape. The holotapes themselves were either never made or deleted, but the voice files still remain, and it's still referenced in the main holotape script. The first 4 audio tapes were recorded by the game's audio director Mark Lampert. It's unknown why these were cut, as they detail Fox's time in the vault before the war and explain how he became a super mutant.
Is this thing on? Oh, yeah, it is. I see the little needle moving. But let me start at the beginning. My name is Shelton Delacroix, and I'm a security officer here in Vault 87. I'm making these recordings as a diary of my life in one of Vault-Tech's newer vaults. They recommended we keep one, so I figured why not? I'm assigned to the laboratory level, which sure beats babysitting the reactor room. Hopefully, in a few more months, I'll be allowed to learn a little more. It's also hush-hush, but that's the way things are around here. Anyway, I'm due on shift soon, so I'll record more later. Things are getting a bit weird up here on the laboratory level. I swear, I keep hearing these crazy noises coming from the experimentation chambers. When I asked about it, they told me it's the animals they're testing on. What the heck are they doing to them? I think I may look into it some more. It gets boring standing in the hallways and pacing back and forth. I don't know where to begin. I have to report what I've seen. There has to be a record of this somewhere. Sykes and Kostler dragged some unconscious guy from the dorms into the labs. I tried to ask what was going on, but they just glared at me. After they came back out of the containment area, they told me not to tell anyone what I saw, or I'd regret it. Sykes was even patting his 10mm when he said that. I think they were threatening to kill me. After they left, I snuck into the containment room and I almost threw up. I don't even know how to describe it. It looked sort of human, but it was deformed. I could see some of its organs on the surface of its body like they were trying to push through. Its skin was disgusting, green and brown and bruised like it was bleeding on the inside. And the smell, it was horrible. I staggered out of there and came here to get this all down. What the hell are they doing in this place? Oh my god. It's all making sense. The missing people and those things. They... Oh my fucking god. I'm in hiding now. I'm recording this on the reactor level. They found one of the older recordings, and now they want me in the labs. Luckily, I had a friend in the security team, and they told me to run. So, here I am. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Merrick and his team are obviously experimenting on people. Someone's got to put a stop to it. But how? There's nowhere to go and no one to tell. Shit, what am I gonna... Oh my god. They're coming. Tell my wife in Dorm E that I love her.
Stupid machine! How you work this thing? This thing is stupid! Smash it!
Fox has another intriguing element of his design, his torn Vault 87 jumpsuit, an item that can never be attained by the player. There's also an unused pristine version of the Vault 87 suit as well, but it was never placed anywhere in the world and can never be used as a result. I'm guessing its omission was a simple oversight. Vault 87 was also intended to have an Overseer terminal, and there's a long series of cut messages that would have appeared on it. The terminal was meant to have the option to open an escape tunnel leading to the vault's exit, but in the final game there isn't an Overseer's office here, suggesting that the room was cut at some point. The first 2 notes are from Dr. Braun to the Overseer and read, "Congratulations. Vault 87 has been chosen as one of the few select vaults to receive a genuine GEC. The device was delivered before final sealing of the vault and installed into its secure pedestal by our special GEC Scramble team. I'd like to extend my best wishes to you and all your population. Your survival will ensure the continuation of the human race, and to carry the Vault-Tec name into the future. Dr. Stanislaus Braun, Director, Societal Preservation Program, Vault-Tec Corporation. The second note reads, a letter to the Overseer from Dr. Stanislaus Braun. If you are reading this, emergency vault interment procedures have been initiated, and you and your control group have been sealed into your vault. Congratulations. You are now a vital part of the most ambitious program ever undertaken by Vault-Tec. If you have not yet read your sealed orders, do so now. They will outline the experimental protocols assigned to your control group. Please remember that deviation from these protocols in any way will jeopardize the success of the program, and may be considered grounds for termination by Vault-Tec Corporation, as outlined in your employment agreement. Your vault may or may not have been selected to receive a GEC module. Please see Attachment A for details. Dr. Stanislaus Braun, Director, Societal Preservation Program, Vault-Tec Corporation. The next three messages regard some of the Vault's population. Dr. Wayne Merrick. I'm told that Dr. Merrick is one of the brightest minds in the field of accelerated evolution, and apparently Vault-Tec agrees. Because they've set up this vault around him to suit all of his needs in the event that the bombs fall. All of his data and his work have been transferred to the facility from many important sources such as Mariposa Base, West-Tec, and Vault-Tec labs. I like Dr. Merrick. He's driven without being careless. He knows that in the event of a nuclear war, he may be the only person left in the world that can advance human genetics beyond where they are now. He's meticulous, detail-oriented, and reports everything to me on a regular basis. Daniel Koster, an excellent maintenance chief. Thorough, careful, and honest to a fault. In fact, that's becoming a problem. His security clearance isn't high enough yet to grant him access to all of the information regarding the FEV experiments performed by Dr. Merrick, but we may have to bring him into the fold soon. In the event we need major repairs on A level, we'll definitely need his skills. Peter Stevens. This gentleman continues to impress me. He was just recently promoted to Technician 3rd Class by Chief Koster for his ingenuity and ability to think in emergencies. Given these talents, I think he'd make an excellent candidate for Koster's eventual successor if the need should ever arise. The next note is about the GEC and reads, the GEC is, quite simply, the most advanced piece of technology ever developed by Vault-Tec, a terraforming module capable of creating life from complete lifelessness. After riding out the storm of nuclear Armageddon in a Vault-Tec patented vault, residents can then activate the GEC and create a new Earth in paradise. Craters and dust will give way to rolling grasslands and sparkling clear water. Of course, due to time and monetary constraints, not every vault will be equipped with a GEC module. The seventh and final note details the aftermath of the vault being struck by a nuclear warhead. I'm quite sad to report that due to a direct hit from what I presume to be a nuclear weapon on the entry area of Vault 87, we will be unable to provide scouting reports as outlined in Vault-Tec's operation manual. The main door to Vault 87 is damaged beyond repair, and we're detecting extremely high levels of lethal radiation outside and in the entry tunnel. These notes were well written and provided some interesting information on the vault, so it's too bad they weren't included. One of the most drastic changes in development involved Vault 87, as Emil Palarulo revealed. A really large change concerned Dad's fate after leaving Vault 101. In the original script, the player never worked with Dad to restore Project Purity, and Dad didn't honorably sacrifice himself to save his child and colleagues from Colonel Autumn's troops. Instead, the player found Dad in Vault 87, where he was in the process of being turned into a super mutant, and begged his child to end his life. It was a potentially moving moment, but the fact Dad could have turned into a super mutant and fought his child felt really cliched, and honestly too close for my taste to a plot twist in Prey. When that scene underwent revision, we realized how great it would be for the player to actually work with Dad in Project Purity, even if only for a bit, and the final version was superior in just about every way. Adam Adowicz made 4 pieces of concept art for this mutated version of Dad, giving us an idea of how he might have looked. Each of these is fantastic and provides a fascinating look at the game's early development. In Vault 87, there are failed FEV test subjects, and perhaps this asset was recycled for environmental storytelling after this iteration of the main quest line was cut out. These creatures might be unrelated, but they seemingly provide us the best look at what Mutant Dad would have looked like in-game. Notably, the very first container implemented in Fallout 3 was an IV stand. It's probably a coincidence, but every depiction of Mutant Dad shows an IV, and perhaps this was originally intended for him. I think this variation sounds much more interesting than simply restoring Project Purity with Dad and having him die later on anyway. In the early map shown at GDC 2012, main quest locations are marked black and white, and tantalizingly Oasis is marked as part of the main story. This starts to make sense when you consider how much effort went into the area and how many unique assets it has. Everything from Herald to armor, props, and architecture that aren't used anywhere else. No other side quest in the game had so many resources put into it, but it's anyone's guess how this area tied into the main story. Perhaps the player's dad originally traveled here thinking a Gek had been deployed, and that he could find more information about it. Maybe Harold told him about FEV, which then led him to Vault 87 and being transformed into a super mutant. Further supporting this, all of the side quests were added sequentially at the same time, except for MS-07, the Cut Outcast quest I mentioned in a previous video, and Harold's quest MS-10, both of which were added much later in development. Considering the way that side quests were added, MS-10 should use the form ID 00014E9D, but it was deleted at some point in development. This is particularly interesting, as it suggests the Oasis side quest took the place of the original MS-10 side quest. What this quest was is completely unknown, unfortunately, as there are no remaining traces of it. There's also an interesting cut armor piece called Oasis Exile Hood. This item is visually identical to the Oasis Druid hood that is used, but it's worth more caps when sold. It's unclear what this was meant for or why it was cut, but perhaps it's somehow related to the cut main quest that once took place here. There's also an item called Empty Sap Container, but that's almost definitely related to Harold's quest and not the main quest that was once planned.
Good work, soldier. Make sure the Gek is secured aboard my vertibird.
After retrieving the Gek, the player is ambushed by the Enclave, then captured and taken to their hidden base at Raven Rock. The player is then released, starting the quest The American Dream. Internally, this quest is named MQ-09, and the following quest of the main storyline, Take It Back, is named MQ-11. So what happened to the quest in between? There are remnants of an unused quest called Infiltration, and its internal prefix is MQ-10. The quest objectives for it still remain and are as follows. Enter Rivet City through the underwater diving hatch. Then the player would obtain the prototype power source. Last, you'd return the prototype power source described Rothschild at the Citadel, before finally meeting with Elder Lyons and his Solar to complete the quest. My first guess was that this quest primarily took place in the Broken Bow section of Rivet City, which can still be accessed via an underwater door. I suspected it somehow involved Pinkerton, a self-described electrician who's talented enough to operate on synths. So certainly he's capable of developing a prototype power source, right? The problem with that theory is that the Broken Bow was added much later in development, suggesting it only ever existed for the Replicated Man side quest and is completely unrelated to the Cut main quest. The name of the quest, Infiltration, does give us a bit to go off of though. What group was the player infiltrating at Rivet City? Well, we know the Enclave attacked Rivet City in a cut quest, so it doesn't seem like much of a stretch that they took control of the ship afterwards. It's unknown if it's related, but there's an unused actor effect that's internally named Enclave Infiltrator Stealth, and in game it would have been called Stealth Shield. The effect mentions this stops combat, and perhaps the player once used this to sneak past the Enclave's forces at Rivet City. But what was the purpose of the power source the player was taking from Rivet City and then returning to the Brotherhood? Well, the Brotherhood needs Liberty Prime operational to take back Project Purity, but they've spent decades trying to solve its power source issues to no avail. In the final game, Dr. Lee helps the Brotherhood solve this problem, but perhaps the player originally helped out by recovering this prototype power source. Further supporting this theory, there are 3 notes that can still be found at the Citadel, recalling the Brotherhood's difficulty building an accelerated vector fusion module, a power source capable of making Liberty Prime fully operational. The first note is pre-war and regards the US military's issues with the robot. General Chase, I'm sorry, but you're being completely unrealistic. There is simply no way the robot will be combat ready in 3 months. The chassis is complete, all weapon systems are online, and the voice module has been programmed as requested. But power consumption is still our primary concern, and neither Doctors Honeywell nor Park have yet found an acceptable solution. We had hoped to subcontract Vault Tech and utilize the talents of Dr. Braun, but apparently he's gone into seclusion, working on one of their own projects, and they couldn't reach him at this point if they wanted to. I'll give it to you straight, General. This is the biggest robot the world has ever seen, and we just haven't been able to figure out a power source small enough and powerful enough to get the damn thing running with all its systems online. In 3 months, we might be able to guarantee the robot can walk into downtown Anchorage, but all of his weapon systems will be offline. Maybe he can just step on the Red Chinese. Dr. Stanley Bloomfield, Project Lead. The second note is by the Brotherhood and reads, I'm tired of trying to reroute power like some kind of snot-nosed initiate. I don't care what kind of drain it puts on the scribe's ability to research and maintain the weapons and armor. I'm proceeding with the AVF experiments. If I can successfully create an accelerated vector fusion module, similar to the technology I saw Dr. Lee working with all those years ago, we'll have our first real chance of getting the robot fully operational. Maybe then the Western Elders will realize our worth. The final note reads, unfortunately the accelerated vector fusion, AVF experiments haven't gone as planned. Odid suffered second-degree burns, and at one point we accidentally channeled so much power to the robot's head laser, it discharged and nearly killed Elder Lyons. He was not pleased. Interestingly, the second note states that the AVF module was based on one of Dr. Lee's projects. She specifically mentions working on a portable fusion generator at Rivet City.
Our work on portable fusion power and hydroponics are coming along quite nicely, if not quite according to schedule.
Despite that, there's no evidence of any fusion generators in the science lab, and only hydroponic experiments are shown. Rivet City concept art by Adam Adawick seems to depict an early version of the science lab, where a large fusion generator was the main set piece. Perhaps this fusion generator research was the reason the Enclave attacked Rivet City in the first place, but that's simply speculation. This could be another coincidence, but there's a large number of unused kit pieces related to Rivet City. While all Bethesda games have unused set pieces, few areas have this many. It's possible these cut assets were originally intended for the Science Lab's fusion generator experiments, and that they were cut alongside the quest. Tantalizingly, there still seems to be a remnant of this at Rivet City. On top of the ship in the wasteland, the eastern end of the vessel is blocked off by an invisible wall. Just beyond the invisible wall is a path that leads down a staircase and eventually to a very interesting inaccessible door. The area around the door has some leftover nav mesh, though this might have been auto-generated. The door still gives you a prompt to open it, and it has an unused sound. Beneath the door inside of the ship, there's also an unused ambient sound marker. Evidence suggests this door once connected directly to the science lab, as there's an unused door in the science lab marked by caution tape, and the shapes of both doors match. The door's internal ID is Rivet City Room Large Wall Mid Exit, and the exit suffix means it was meant to connect to another location, rather than simply being a set piece. This door is a static object that can't be used, but there's a cut working door that shares the exact same model, and even uses the same cut hanger door sound as the exterior door found in the Wasteland. Perhaps the player once snuck across the top of the ship and reached the science lab via this entrance. In synopsis, it seems the player snuck through Rivet City using experimental technology to recover the AVF module, then returned it to the Brotherhood so they could power Liberty Prime. It's unknown how much of this quest was completed, but presumably it was cut when the Enclave's attack on Rivet City was scrapped.
The good people of this country cannot regain control while mutation runs rampant through our land. My soldiers cannot stem the tide, nor can the cult you've come into contact with, this Brotherhood of Steel.
After escaping from confinement, the player meets President Eden, the leader of the Enclave. The artificial intelligence reveals its secret plan to purify the wasteland, and asks you to insert a modified version of FEV into Project Purity's filtration system, which would kill all of the mutated creatures in the region. At this point, the player exits the base and returns to the Citadel, where the Brotherhood is preparing to attack the Enclave at Project Purity. Here they learn that Dr. Lee has helped restore a gargantuan US Army robot called Liberty Prime. Then the player, the Brotherhood, and Liberty Prime leave the Citadel, beginning the quest Take It Back. This is one of, if not the single most impressive moment in the game, but Bethesda once had even more ambitious plans. In an interview, Emil Polarulo stated, "Liberty Prime is kind of an interesting case. We knew we wanted to have this big, pre-war, anti-communist robot. In the original plan, he was going to be massive, and the player was going to ride in his head anime style. And, well, yeah, that never happened." This would have been an incredible scene and made one of the most visually spectacular moments in the series even better. However, I can definitely see why it was cut, as it likely would have been a performance nightmare. There's also some placeholder voice lines for Liberty Prime that were used for testing early in development.
Placeholder 10, placeholder 11, placeholder 12.
There's pressure building up in the holding tanks. It needs to be released now, or else the whole facility could explode.
After arriving at the Jefferson Memorial and confronting Colonel Autumn in the Rotunda, Dr. Lee tells the player that Project Purity was heavily damaged and is on the verge of self-destructing. This can be avoided if the purifier is activated, but the control room has been flooded with lethal levels of radiation. In the base game, you can either sacrifice yourself to save the wasteland, or have Sarah Lyons sacrifice herself instead. Optionally, the player can also do nothing and allow the purifier to explode. This ending also went through significant alteration, as Emil Polarulo revealed in an interview. "When we originally wrote the main story, your character died at the end. There was really only that one ending. We liked the serious tone of it, and felt the theme of sacrifice was really important for what we were doing with the game. Not having multiple ways to complete the game was pretty contrary to the spirit of Fallout, so we designed and implemented a few ways to end the game. You can sacrifice yourself inside the purifier, you can have Sarah Lyons go in, or you can just stand there and refuse to do anything, and the purifier complex will blow up around you." Of all of the alterations made to the main questline, this was one of the best changes, as multiple endings are a core concept of the series. I suspect this rewrite happened relatively late though, as the main quest ending choices all occur in the final room of the game. The player chooses to use FEV or not, and can sacrifice themselves or Sarah Lyons, but otherwise the critical path is extremely linear.
If the Enclave has the Gek, there's nothing stopping them from starting the purifier. They'll figure out the code eventually.
I'm afraid you're right. We need to act now while we can.
Unfortunately, one of these endings would seriously affect the coherency of the main questline. When the player returns to the Citadel, the Brotherhood is urgently preparing to attack Project Purity. While the Enclave is on the verge of controlling clean water in the capital wasteland, it's totally unknown why the Brotherhood is attacking them so desperately. Intriguingly, one of the early Pipboy Mockup screens reveals the quest was once envisioned much differently. It reads, "Pentagon rallying the troops." The quest stages were, return to the Pentagon, inform the Brotherhood of the Enclave's plans for Project Purity, then rally the troops. The second objective suggests that Eden's plan to kill all of the Wasteland's mutated creatures was originally the plan of the entire organization, not just a secret plan. This would have made the Brotherhood's rush to attack Project Purity make much more sense than it does in the final game. The Enclave was originally on the verge of committing genocide against countless mutated creatures, rather than simply taking control of a giant water purifier. Their mutant cleansing plan seems to have been an homage to the Enclave's similar plan in Fallout 2. It seems this was altered to give the player an additional ending choice, letting them decide the fate of the Wasteland, rather than it being the Enclave's primary goal. Again, I think Bethesda made the right choice to include multiple endings, but it seems they simply didn't take the time to fix the plot holes that change created. During Fallout 3's production, Todd Howard mentioned that there were well over 200 endings, stating, "Being that we are Bethesda, everything gets a bit big. So as of last week, we're over 200 endings. That is not an exaggeration, but it does deserve some description. 200 endings, that's a lot. So originally when we started, we had various iterations of the ending. The ending is kind of cinematic. That's dynamic based on the things you've done. When we started, it was kind of fuzzy. It was like, well, there's like 9, maybe 12, and we started adding things to it. So if you've done this or not this, you'd get this other tweak to the ending, and we kept doing that. And you know, even just 2 weeks ago, someone had this idea, oh, we should add this idea to the ending. Sorry, I'm not going to spoil what that is. And I said, oh, that's a genius idea, we have to do that. So I was like, okay, there's like 4 versions of that part, and that multiplies by, at the time, we were at about 60 endings. So now there's 4 versions of that, so now there are around 240 versions. Of course, there are nowhere near 240 endings in the final game, and it's unclear what happened here. It's possible that Todd Howard was simply embellishing the truth to build hype for the game's upcoming release, but it's certainly possible that some of these endings were cut out for time or budget constraints. As mentioned earlier, the final quest is internally named MQ11, but there's a 12th unused main quest called Last Rites. It's possible this is related to the Broken Steel DLC, but all of the remnants of it are missing, so your guess is as good as mine. Throughout this video, we've looked at content from multiple iterations of the main questline, but the most interesting aspects are the major changes made to the early draft of the story. This is completely speculation, but here's my theory on how it originally played out. The player awakes in Vault 101 on their 19th birthday into a much more open-ended escape sequence. They begin their search for their dad and learn about Project Purity from Dr. Lee. At the Jefferson Memorial, the player finds a recording from their dad revealing that he traveled to Vault 112. There, the player enters a simulation pod and is transported into Tranquility Lane. Dad seemingly isn't present in this iteration of the story and perhaps already escaped. Instead, Braun tells them some relevant information about Project Purity, their father, or maybe even the accelerated vector fusion module. The player then travels to Rivet City and speaks to Dr. Lee about what Braun told them. But as they do, the Enclave unleashes a full-on assault on the settlement, likely killing many generic NPCs as they take control of the ship. You guide Dr. Lee and some of the Rivet City citizens to safety, taking them through the Taft tunnels to reach the Citadel. After meeting the Brotherhood of Steel, you hear tales about a verdant oasis out in the wasteland where a Gek might have been deployed. There, the player meets a mutated tree named Harold, and he recounts telling their father about the forced evolutionary virus. He tells them their dad traveled to Vault 87 in hopes of discovering more about FEV and how it could be used in Project Purity. The player then travels to Vault 87 and reunites with their father, only to discover he's in the process of being transformed into a mutant abomination. An emotional confrontation leads to a fight breaking out where the player potentially kills their dad. Heartbroken from the death of their father, the player travels further into the irradiated ruins of the vault, discovering the audio logs of one of the vault's former inhabitants named Fox. The player then finds the Gek and prepares to exit the vault. On their way back to the surface, they're attacked and taken captive by the Enclave. You awake as a prisoner in the Enclave's base at Raven Rock, then escape and meet the Enclave's leader. He tells you about their plan to purify the wasteland by inserting a modified version of FEV virus into Project Purity. You then have the option to convince him to destroy himself and Raven Rock before escaping. The player returns to the Citadel and tells the Brotherhood about the Enclave's plans. Without Liberty Prime, the Brotherhood has little hope of retaking Project Purity, but Dr. Lee tells them about an experimental power source called an AVF module that she developed at Rivet City. You then travel to the now Enclave-controlled Rivet City, potentially back through the Taft tunnels that once connected the two locations. The player equips an experimental stealth suit that allows them to sneak past the Enclave's guards and into the science labs, where they steal the experimental power source. With the power source recovered, Liberty Prime is finally operational. The player gets inside Liberty Prime's head, then rides the giant mech into battle. You and the Brotherhood then fight your way to the Jefferson Memorial. After one last fateful showdown with Colonel Autumn, the player is only given a single option to complete the game. They must travel into the control room of Project Purity, sacrificing themselves to save the wasteland, ending the game and bringing the story to a close. In summary, Fallout 3's main quest was altered a staggering number of times, in ways that range from drastic to insignificant for both better and worse. Unfortunately, many of the most interesting scrapped elements were cut so early or so thoroughly that they can never be restored properly. Some of these changes would have made Fallout 3 into an even better game. Ultimately though, all of this was left on the cutting room floor.